The Sumerians did not stumble upon civilization, they crafted it. Between the Tigris and Euphrates, unpredictable rivers gave life and death. To survive, they learned to tame the waters with canals, dikes, and irrigation. Where water flowed, cities bloomed. By 3500 BCE, Uruk had risen, a vast city of over 40,000 people. It had walls, temples, and organized streets. Eridu, older still, was believed to be the first city founded by gods themselves according to Sumerian lore. These were not mere villages. They were the first true cities in history, centers of trade, religion, governance, and identity. Civilization demands memory. And so the Sumerians invented writing, not for poetry, not yet, for accounting. Around 3200 BCE, they began pressing marks into clay tablets using reed styluses. These became cuneiform, the world's first known writing system. What began as trade records evolved into literature, treaties, laws, and hymns. In time, scribes would preserve the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first great human story. Through writing, memory no longer needed a voice. Stone would now speak for millennia. In Sumer, gods walked among men. Every city had its patron deity. Inanna of Uruk, Enki of Eridu, Anu of the heavens. Their stories, complex, tragic, divine, shaped daily life. Massive ziggurats rose in their honor, step temples reaching toward the heavens. Priests governed in their name, interpreting omens and conducting sacrifices. Religion wasn't separate from politics. It was power. The Sumerians believed that human beings were created to serve the gods, to feed them with ritual and labor. Dreams, floods, stars, they were all divine messages. The gods gave life, and they could take it away. Sumer was not a unified kingdom. It was a patchwork of city-states: Ur, Uruk, Lagash, Kish, Umma, each ruled by a Lugal, a great man or king. These city-states often warred for control of land and water. Early kings claimed divine sanction. Lugal-Zagesi of Umma, Sargon of Akkad, names that echo like thunder through time. Kingship itself was said to be handed down from heaven, and once taken, rarely given back. Power was recorded in stone. From victory steels to foundation tablets, Sumerian kings made sure their reigns would be remembered, by gods and men alike. Around 2334 BCE, the Sumerian dream changed forever. From the north came Sargon of Akkad, an orphan raised by a gardener, a cupbearer turned king. With ambition as vast as the desert, he conquered Sumer and forged the world's first known empire. The Akkadian Empire stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. Sargon standardized weights, laws, and language. Under his rule, the Akkadian tongue began to replace Sumerian in daily use. But empires built on conquest are also built on sand. After just a century, rebellion, famine, and foreign invasion saw Akkad fall into ruin. What was life like for the ordinary Sumerian? Farmers toiled in the hot sun, carefully irrigating their barley fields. Merchants traded copper, lapis lazuli, and grain across long-distance trade routes. Women baked bread in clay ovens. Children recited their lessons in tablet schools, learning cuneiform stroke by stroke. Sumer had laws, contracts, and even divorce. They brewed beer, celebrated festivals, and buried their dead with care. Beneath the shadow of the ziggurat, everyday life pulsed with rhythm, resilience, and ritual. We owe the Sumerians more than writing. They divided the hour into 60 minutes, the circle into 360 degrees. They mapped the stars, predicted eclipses, built calendars based on the moon. Their number system, sexagesimal, still lingers in our timekeeping. Their temples, built with crude tools and human ingenuity, stood for centuries. Civilization, as we know it, began here, not just in bricks, but in thought. By 2000 BCE, the glory of Sumer began to fade. Environmental degradation, salinized fields, and shifting rivers devastated agriculture. Foreign invaders, the Amorites, Elamites, and Gutians, overran the weakened cities. Ur fell, Uruk emptied, the Sumerian language died, preserved only in liturgy. But echoes remained. Babylon would rise, carrying Sumer's torch. The myths would be copied, the writing refined. Their gods would become templates for others. And then, silence for millennia. In the 19th century, explorers and archaeologists rediscovered Sumer. Beneath the sands of Iraq, they uncovered cities once thought to be legend. Leonard Woolley unearthed Ur's royal tombs. Thousands of clay tablets, now in museums, spoke again after 4,000 years. A forgotten civilization told its story to the modern world. The Sumerians vanished, but they never truly disappeared. Their ideas, writing, law, astronomy, kingship, formed the foundation of what we call civilization. They were the first to dream of eternity, to measure time, to write their names into stone, and in doing so, they became timeless. In a land where the sun rises over golden sand and sets behind colossal stone gods, where the river Nile breathes life into barren desert, there arose a civilization that would endure for over 3 millennia. This was no ordinary kingdom. This was Egypt, a land where time itself seemed to bend, where pharaohs were gods and death was not an end, but a transformation. This is the story of ancient Egypt, of divine rulers, eternal tombs, and a people who built forever into stone. Egypt owes its very existence to the Nile. Without it, there would be only sand, but with it, a miracle. Predictable, annual floods that laid down rich, dark silt along the riverbanks, perfect for farming. The Nile was more than water. It was a lifeline, a highway, a source of food and belief. The ancient Egyptians divided their year into 3 seasons based on its flooding cycle. Akhet, the inundation; Perit, the growing season; Shemu, the harvest. Towns sprang up along its edges. Papyrus was harvested for writing in boats. Fish and fowl were abundant. Farmers learned to control the water with dikes and canals, turning unpredictable nature into manageable bounty. The Nile flowed south to north, but their world flowed with it, from death to life, from chaos to order. Around 3100 BCE, the warring regions of Upper and Lower Egypt were united by a man known as Narmer, or Menes. This moment wasn't merely political. To the Egyptians, it was cosmic. The unification of Egypt reflected the taming of duality, of land and water, sun and moon, life and death. Narmer wore the double crown, white for Upper Egypt, red for Lower, symbolizing his dominion over both. He founded the first dynasty, and thus began the story of the pharaohs. Rulers not merely of people, but of heaven and earth. The pharaoh wasn't just a king, he was a god. On earth, he was Horus, the falcon god. In death, he became Osiris, the lord of the afterlife. The pharaoh was expected to uphold Ma'at, the sacred balance of the universe. He alone could commune with the gods, make offerings, and ensure the annual flood came as it should. He didn't rule alone. Viziers, priests, architects, and scribes formed a mighty bureaucracy. But no one doubted. The pharaoh's word was law. When he walked, people bowed. When he died, they built mountains. During the Old Kingdom, 2686 to 2181 BCE, Egypt became the land of pyramids. These colossal structures were not simply tombs. They were resurrection engines, designed to guide the soul of the pharaoh to the stars. The first was the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, built for King Djoser. It was designed by the architect Imhotep, later deified as a god of wisdom. Then came Pharaoh Sneferu, who experimented with pyramid shapes. His bent pyramid, followed by the perfect red pyramid, laid the foundation for what was to come. And then Khufu, builder of the Great Pyramid at Giza. 481 feet tall, perfectly aligned with the cardinal points, constructed of over 2 million limestone blocks. How it was built remains one of the world's enduring mysteries, yet the workers were not slaves. Archaeology tells us they were skilled laborers, organized into teams, paid in beer, bread, and beef. They lived in nearby villages, cared for by physicians, honored in death. Their labor was not cruelty, it was cosmic duty. To run a kingdom, you need memory. And so the Egyptians developed writing. Their earliest script, hieroglyphs, appeared around 3100 BCE. Hieroglyphs were sacred symbols, blending image and sound. They were carved on temple walls and written on scrolls of papyrus. To become a scribe was to enter the elite, able to write laws, track harvests, record rituals, and draft contracts. Other writing systems followed: hieratic, a cursive script for daily use, and later Demotic, for the people. Through writing, Egypt preserved its beliefs, its history, and even its jokes. Egyptian religion was complex, layered, and deeply personal. There was no single doctrine, no central holy book, but there was Ma'at, order, justice, balance, and it was maintained through devotion. Gods governed every part of life. Ra, the sun god, sailed across the sky by day and battled chaos by night. Osiris, king of the dead, judged the souls of men. Isis, his sister wife, was a healer and magician. Thoth, the ibis-headed god, measured time and recorded fate. Temples were not places of public worship. They were homes for the gods. Priests bathed the statues, clothed them, and fed them offerings daily. Festivals brought gods into the streets. Statues paraded on boats, music and incense filling the air. Religion wasn't separate from life. It was life. Death was not feared. It was prepared for. The soul, the Ka, needed a body to return to. So the dead were mummified, the brain removed, the organs stored in jars, the body dried in natron, then wrapped with spells and amulets. The journey after death was perilous. Demons, gates, riddles. But the Book of the Dead held the answers, spells to guide the soul to judgment. In the Hall of Two Truths, the heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. A pure heart meant paradise. A guilty one was devoured by Ammit, the soul eater. For the righteous, eternal life awaited in the field of reeds, a perfect mirror of Egypt, where crops grew forever and families reunited. Not everyone was a pharaoh or priest. Most Egyptians were farmers, potters, builders, fishermen, and traders. They lived in mud brick houses, wore linen clothes, and ate bread, onions, and beer. Men and women both worked. Women could inherit property, initiate divorce, and run businesses. Children played with toys, balls, dolls, even board games like Senate, a game linked to fate. Life was hard but structured. Taxes were paid in grain. Labor was owed to the state. Festivals and family brought joy. They sang, danced, painted, they loved, they grieved, just like us. The old kingdom eventually collapsed due to famine, weak rulers, and economic strain, but Egypt revived. In the Middle Kingdom, pharaohs like Senuseret III expanded into Nubia and reformed the government. Art and literature flourished. Later, during the New Kingdom, 1550–1077 BCE, Egypt became an empire. Under Thutmose III, it stretched to Syria. Under Hatshepsut, a woman pharaoh, trade blossomed. Temples like Karnak and Luxor became marvels. Tombs were now hidden in the Valley of the Kings, safe from grave robbers. One pharaoh broke all the rules, Akhenaten. He abolished the old gods and worshipped one, the Aten, the sun disk. He built a new capital, Akhetaten, and changed the art, showing himself with a belly, his family and intimate scenes, kissed by sun rays. His wife, Nefertiti, became legendary. But his reforms died with him. His son, Tutankhamun, restored the old ways, and Akhenaten's name was erased from monuments. Ramses II, or Ramses the Great, ruled for 66 years. He fought the Battle of Kadesh, the largest chariot battle in history, and later signed a peace treaty with the Hittites. He built monuments everywhere. His face adorns Abu Simbel, carved into cliffs to awe all who approach from Nubia. But Egypt was changing. After Ramses, decline set in. The treasury drained, priests gained power, foreign invasions grew. By 1070 BC, the new kingdom ended. Egypt was never the same. Over centuries, Egypt was conquered by Persians, then Alexander the Great, then Rome. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh, was brilliant and multilingual. But her alliances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony ended in tragedy. Egypt became a Roman province. The temples fell silent. The language of the gods faded. The sands reclaimed the past. But Egypt was never truly lost. In 1799, the Rosetta Stone was discovered. It unlocked hieroglyphs. The voices of the ancients spoke once more. Egypt is not gone. It's in our calendars, our architecture, our dreams. It gave us science, art, spirituality, and story. It taught the world that civilization could rise from desert, that memory could be carved in stone, and that the soul, like the Nile, flows forever. In the mists of prehistory, where modern Pakistan and northwest India now lie, a mighty civilization stirred. Long before the rise of Rome, centuries before the pyramids, the people of the Indus Valley built cities with plumbing, standardized bricks, and trading networks that stretched across Asia. Thousands of years later, as the ancient world reshaped itself, a new Indian empire would rise under the steel will of Chandragupta and the remorseful heart of Ashoka, becoming the first great unifier of the subcontinent. This is the story of the East's early brilliance, of vanished cities and legendary kings, of empire, wisdom, and transformation. The Indus Valley Civilization, also called the Harappan Civilization, emerged around 2600 BCE. It flourished in what is now Pakistan and Western India, spreading across more than 1 million square kilometers. It was one of the world's 3 earliest civilizations, alongside Egypt and Mesopotamia. But unlike them, the Harappans left behind no grand tombs or conqueror kings. They built not in glory, but in harmony. The cities of Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, and Lothal were marvels of urban design, featuring straight streets, multi-story homes, public baths, wells, and possibly the world's first municipal sewage system. Though their script remains undeciphered, archaeology reveals a peaceful, organized society. Houses were equipped with toilets and private wells, markets were regulated, storage granaries were centralized, trade was robust, reaching Mesopotamia and beyond. Seals with animal motifs and undeciphered writing suggest a complex system of identity, possibly administrative control or even early currency. Artifacts show few weapons. Little evidence of large-scale warfare has ever been found. This was not a land ruled by swords. It was ruled by water, brick, and balance. The Harappans worshiped gods we can only guess at. Terracotta figurines suggest a mother goddess cult. One seal appears to depict a horned figure seated in a yogic pose, perhaps an early form of the Hindu god Shiva. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro may have been used for ritual purification, hinting at a culture of cleanliness and sacred water rites. Yet we don't know what language they spoke. We don't know how they governed. We don't even know what they called themselves. A civilization so advanced, yet still a whisper across the ages. By 1900 BCE, the great Harappan cities began to decline. Why? Perhaps climate change played a role. The once mighty Saraswati River dried up. Monsoons shifted. Agricultural output may have collapsed. Others cite overpopulation or gradual migration. There's no evidence of violent conquest or sudden disaster. Rather, it seems the cities were slowly abandoned. Their brick walls faded into the dust, their writing lost to time. For over 1,000 years, the land that once held these magnificent cities grew quiet, but not forever. By 600 BCE, India was changing again. The Vedic age had passed. Dozens of regional kingdoms emerged called Mahajanapadas. They fought, traded, and built alliances across the Ganges plains. Iron tools increased productivity. Urban life returned. Philosophers like Buddha and Mahavira challenged traditional religion and caste. Out of this crucible, a single man would rise, one who would take a divided land and forge it into empire. In 321 BCE, after the death of Alexander the Great, a new power rose in the Ganges Valley. His name was Chandragupta Maurya. Born into humble beginnings, perhaps even a peasant, he overthrew the corrupt Nanda dynasty with the guidance of his cunning advisor Chanakya, also known as Kautilya. Chandragupta formed the Mauryan Empire, unifying northern India for the first time in history. He defeated Seleucus I, one of Alexander's generals, securing the Indus Valley and forging diplomatic ties with the Greeks. His capital, Pataliputra, modern-day Patna, became one of the largest cities in the world, protected by timber palisades and a sprawling bureaucracy. Chandragupta ruled not by impulse, but by policy. His advisor Chanakya wrote the Artha Shastra, a manual of statecraft, economics, and espionage. It's often compared to Machiavelli's The Prince, but written nearly 1,800 years earlier. The Mauryan government was highly centralized. It maintained roads, mines, state-run markets, and even hospitals. A network of spies ensured loyalty and order. The empire was organized into provinces, each overseen by a royal governor. Revenue came from agriculture and trade, managed with detailed record-keeping. It was perhaps the most sophisticated bureaucracy the world had yet seen. Chandragupta's grandson, Ashoka, would become India's most famous emperor. Early in his reign, he waged brutal wars. His conquest of Kalinga on the eastern coast was one of the bloodiest campaigns in Indian history. Over 100,000 died. But witnessing this carnage changed him. Ashoka renounced violence and converted to Buddhism. He pledged to rule through Dhamma, a code of moral conduct based on tolerance, compassion, and righteousness. He banned animal sacrifice. He built rest houses, hospitals, and wells. He sent missionaries to Sri Lanka, Central Asia, even Greece. Under Ashoka, the Mauryan Empire reached its greatest moral and territorial height. Ashoka's message survives through his edicts, carved into stone pillars and cliffs across the empire in multiple languages and scripts. These edicts spoke not of conquest, but of peace, duty, and harmony. They remain one of the earliest examples of state-sponsored ethical governance. He commissioned stupas, including the famous Sanchi Stupa, and sent support to Buddhist monasteries far and wide. Ashoka's lion capital of Sarnath would one day become the national emblem of modern India. After Ashoka's death in 232 BCE, the Mauryan Empire began to unravel. His successors lacked his vision. Regional governors grew powerful. By 185 BCE, the last Mauryan ruler was assassinated, but the dream of unity, of righteous rule and spiritual governance remained. India would not see another empire of such scale until the rise of the Guptas, centuries later. From the silent ruins of the Indus to the lions of Sarnath, from undeciphered seals to carved edicts that speak across millennia, the legacy of ancient India endures. The Harappans showed us that cities could rise in peace. The Mauryans showed us that empires could rise in principle. In both we find the glory of the East, not in conquest but in civilization, not in domination but in wisdom, and always in the enduring dream of unity. In the vast expanse of East Asia, along the Yellow River and beyond the Great Wall, A civilization emerged that would endure for more than 4,000 years. China's history is not just the tale of kings and emperors. It is the evolution of a philosophy, a worldview, a belief that rulers must serve heaven and the people in balance. That belief shaped a succession of dynasties, each rising under divine favor, each falling when that favor was lost. This is the story of the mandate of heaven. This is the story of dynastic China. Legend tells of the Xia dynasty, China's first, founded around 2070 BCE by Yu the Great, a man who tamed the floods of the Yellow River. While its existence is still debated, it marks the mythic beginning of Chinese kingship. The Shang dynasty, circa 1600 to 1036 BCE, gives us the first verifiable Chinese state. Rulers presided over Bronze Age city-states, practiced ancestor worship, and wrote the earliest Chinese script, etched on oracle bones used to divine the future. The Shang kings claimed divine right, but the concept of a heavenly mandate had not yet emerged. That would come next. In 1036 BCE, the Zhou dynasty overthrew the Shang. They justified this by introducing a revolutionary concept, the mandate of heaven. This idea held that heaven granted the right to rule, not based on birth, but virtue. If a dynasty became corrupt, heaven would withdraw its favor, causing natural disasters, rebellion, and the fall of the dynasty. The Zhou ruled for centuries, but their power faded. By 771 BCE, the Western Zhou collapsed, giving rise to the Eastern Zhou period, marked by feuding states, great thinkers, and chaos. As warlords vied for control, thinkers turned inward, asking, "How should we live?" Confucius offered order through hierarchy, respect, and ritual. He believed society should be built on relationships between father and son, ruler and subject. Others offered different visions. Lao Tzu taught a balance in nature through Taoism. Legalists demanded strict laws and obedience. This was the 100 Schools of Thought, a golden age of Chinese philosophy, birthed from political chaos. By 221 BCE, after centuries of conflict, the Qin state emerged victorious. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, unified the warring states with ruthless efficiency. He standardized weights, measures, currency, and script. He connected and extended what would become the Great Wall. But his rule was harsh. Dissenters were buried alive, books were burned. The legalist system replaced Confucian ideals. Upon his death, he was buried in a tomb guarded by 8,000 life-size clay soldiers. His dynasty lasted only 15 years, but set the foundation for imperial China. The Han dynasty, 206 BCE, 220 CE, restored Confucianism and ushered in a golden age. Under Emperor Wu, China expanded deep into Central Asia and Korea. The Silk Road connected China to the West, trading silk, spices, and ideas. The government was staffed by scholar officials, selected through civil service exams. Science flourished. Yet by the 2nd century CE, the Han declined. Corruption, uprisings, and regional warlords shattered unity. The mandate had passed. For nearly 400 years, China fractured into rival kingdoms. Northern China saw invasions by steppe nomads. The south became a refuge of learning and art. Buddhism arrived from India, offering solace in uncertain times. Monasteries multiplied. Carved stone Buddhas towered over rivers and mountains. It was a time of pain, but also profound cultural fusion. The Tang dynasty, 618 to 907 CE, reunited China and ignited one of its most brilliant eras. Chang'an, the Tang capital, was the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the world, home to traders, poets, monks, and ambassadors. This was the age of Li Bai and Du Fu, of landscape painting and advanced printing. Women like Wu Zetian, the only female emperor in Chinese history, rose to power. But rebellion, war, and court intrigue weakened the Tang. the empire fractured once more. The Song dynasty, 960 to 1279, saw massive technological progress. Gunpowder weapons, the compass, movable type printing, and economic growth through trade. Yet militarily, the Song were weak. In 1279, the Mongols under Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, conquered China. The Yuan dynasty, 1271 to 1368, was foreign, but embraced many Chinese traditions. Marco Polo visited and marveled at the empire's splendor. Still, discontent brewed. Famines, floods, and plagues signaled heaven's disfavor. In 1368, the Chinese people rose up and founded the Ming dynasty, restoring Han Chinese rule. The Ming built the Forbidden City, repaired the Great Wall, and oversaw an explosion of culture, including porcelain, painting, and literature. Under Admiral Zheng He, vast fleets sailed as far as Africa, showcasing China's naval might. But isolationism crept in. Court politics weakened the state. The mandate grew dim once more. From Shang to Ming, one idea echoed across centuries: the mandate of heaven. It was not divine right, it was a conditional contract. A ruler who governed well kept heaven's favor. A corrupt or weak ruler lost it. Famine, flood, rebellion, these were seen not as accidents, but as heaven's verdict. This belief shaped Chinese politics, justified revolution, and held emperors accountable, not just to men, but to the cosmos itself. China's dynastic cycle is a rhythm of human ambition, of vision, power, decline, and renewal. In each fall, seeds of rebirth. In each rise, the whisper of responsibility. The Middle Kingdom endures not because of emperors, but because of an idea that power must serve the people, or it will be taken away. That idea still resonates in China and across the world. From the highlands of Iran, a vision was born, of kings who ruled with mercy and strength, who stretched their empire from the Aegean Sea to the banks of the Indus. For over 1,000 years, the Persians shaped the ancient world through diplomacy, war, faith, and philosophy. This is the story of Persia's dream, the rise of the Achaemenids, the fires of Zoroaster, the glory of Persepolis, and the resistance of the Sassanids. A story of empires that defied time and left a legacy still echoing across history. Around 550 BCE, a Persian tribal leader named Cyrus II, now known as Cyrus the Great, rose against the Medes and united the Iranian plateau. Within a few decades, he conquered Lydia and Anatolia, the mighty Neo-Babylonian Empire, and territory stretching to Central Asia. But conquest wasn't what made him great. Mercy did. When Cyrus captured Babylon in 539 BCE, he freed the Jewish people from captivity and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. The Cyrus Cylinder, often called the first charter of human rights, declared freedom of religion and culture for his subjects. Cyrus ruled not just with the sword, but with vision. After a brief power struggle, Darius I seized the throne in 522 BCE. He reorganized the empire into provinces called satrapies, each governed by a satrap. These governors collected taxes and kept order, but answered to the king. Darius built a network of roads, most famously the royal road from Sardis to Susa, over 2,500 kilometers long. Couriers could cross the empire in days. He minted gold coins, standardized weights, and codified laws. He began building Persepolis, the ceremonial capital, a marvel of stone, sculpture, and grandeur. Here, tribute from across the empire was presented in an annual spectacle. This was the zenith of Achaemenid order, vast, tolerant, and intricately managed. The spiritual backbone of the Persian Empire was Zoroastrianism, founded by the prophet Zoroaster. It was one of the world's first monotheistic religions, At its heart was a cosmic struggle between good and evil, Ahura Mazda, the wise lord, versus Angra Mainyu, the spirit of chaos. Zoroastrianism emphasized free will, moral choice, and righteous living. Fire, a symbol of divine truth, was central to worship. Temples housed eternal flames, tended by priests. Its influence would echo into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, shaping ideas of heaven, hell, judgment, and the end of days. Darius sought to expand westward, but in 490 BCE, his army was halted at Marathon by a smaller force of Athenians. His son, Xerxes I, tried again. In 480 BCE, he invaded with a massive army and navy. He won at Thermopylae, burning Athens, but lost at Salamis, where the Greek fleet triumphed. A year later, Persia suffered defeat. Persian kings respected Greek culture and hosted Greek physicians, engineers, and artisans in their courts. At its height, the Achaemenid Empire stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus, from the Caucasus to the Persian Gulf. It ruled over 70 million people, nearly half the world's population at the time. Persepolis, with its vast halls, stairways, and carvings, embodied Persian ideals: unity through diversity, majesty without cruelty. The walls show emissaries from 23 nations, each wearing their native garb, bringing gifts. This was not an empire of assimilation, but of respect, cooperation, and grand vision. But even empires carved in stone are not immortal. In 334 BCE, Alexander of Macedon invaded Asia. In a decade, he defeated the Persian armies of Darius III, marched through Anatolia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and into Persia itself. The decisive blow came at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE. Darius fled and was later killed by his own men. Alexander entered Persepolis and burned it, perhaps in drunken revenge for the Persian burning of Athens. Whether symbolic or strategic, the act marked the end of the Achaemenid world. But Persia did not die, it waited. Out of the vacuum rose the Parthian Empire, 247 BC, 224 CE. Founded by nomads from the northeast, they revived Persian traditions and resisted both Hellenistic and Roman domination. Masters of cavalry, they famously defeated Rome at the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BCE, capturing the Roman general Crassus and thousands of legionaries. Parthians ruled through feudal clans. Their capital at Ctesiphon, near modern Baghdad, became a hub of Persian life once again. Though fragmented and less centralized, the Parthians kept Persian culture alive in a world now shaped by Rome. In 224 CE, a new Persian dynasty rose, the Sassanids, founded by Ardashir I. They claimed descent from the Achaemenids and sought to restore imperial glory. The Sassanids centralized rule, reformed taxation, and made Zoroastrianism the state religion once more. Their art was bold, their cities wealthy, and their armies strong. For 4 centuries, the Sassanids clashed with the Byzantine Empire, the Eastern Roman power. The two empires fought endlessly, with neither gaining permanent dominance. Under Khosrow I, the empire saw a golden age. Philosophers from Greece found refuge in Persia after Justinian closed pagan schools. Science, medicine, and literature thrived. But in seeking to revive past grandeur, the Sassanids spent their strength. In the 7th century, both Persia and Byzantium were exhausted from war. Then came a new force, Islam, spreading rapidly from Arabia. In 636 CE, the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah marked the beginning of the end. In 651 CE, the last Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, was defeated and assassinated. The empire fell. Zoroastrianism was gradually supplanted by Islam. Fire temples faded into memory, and influence endured, adapting to new rulers and new faiths, but always Persian at heart. For over a millennium, Persia shaped the ancient world, not through tyranny, but through order. not by erasing difference, but by embracing it. Cyrus showed mercy where others showed conquest. Darius built a bureaucracy that inspired Rome. Zoroaster taught that each person chooses their path between light and shadow. The dream of Persia was never just power. It was unity, morality, and endurance. Long after the stones of Persepolis crumbled, its spirit lived on, in philosophy, poetry, and empire. The Persian flame, once lit, never died. Among the scattered islands and rugged coasts of the Aegean, a civilization emerged that would change the world, not with empire or armies alone, but with ideas. In Greece, the mind became an empire of its own. Logic, beauty, democracy, philosophy, and human potential. These were their legacies. This is the story of ancient Greece, an experiment in freedom, art, and thought whose influence still shapes us today. Long before Socrates or Athens, the earliest Greek cultures flourished on the Aegean. The Minoans, based on the island of Crete around 2000 BCE, built complex palaces and left behind vibrant frescoes and mysterious scripts. They were seafarers, artists, and worshippers of a goddess-centered religion. Later, the Mycenaeans, warlike Greeks from the mainland, rose around 1600 BCE. Their citadels, such as Mycenae and Tiryns, inspired tales of heroes and kings. Their collapse around 1100 BCE ushered in a dark age, but memory endured in myths of gods, monsters, and epic wars. From oral tradition emerged the first great works of Greek literature, the Iliad and the Odyssey, attributed to the blind poet Homer. These epics told of the Trojan War, of Achilles and Hector, Odysseus and the gods. They taught honor, fate, and the wrath of men and immortals alike. More than stories, they were the spiritual core of early Greece, uniting tribes under shared legends and values. Where others wrote annals of kings, the Greeks wrote poetry of the soul. By 800 BCE, Greek city-states, called polis, emerged. Independent, self-governing, often rivals. Among them, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes. Each polis was small, sometimes only a few thousand citizens, but fierce in pride and innovation. Athens would become the world's first known democracy. In the 5th century BCE, under leaders like Cleisthenes and Pericles, citizens debated laws, judged trials, and chose generals. Power rested not in kings, but in argument, persuasion, and the voice of the people. It was radical, imperfect, and revolutionary. In 490 BCE, the Persian Empire invaded Greece. The tiny polis of Athens met them at Marathon, and against all odds, prevailed. A decade later, King Xerxes launched a massive invasion. Spartans held the pass at Thermopylae. Athens burned. But at Salamis, the Greek navy struck a decisive blow. In 479 BCE, the Persians were finally driven out at Plataea. Though politically divided, the Greeks had defended their freedom and preserved the fragile seed of democracy. With Persian power repelled, Athens entered its golden age. Led by Pericles, the city built the Parthenon, honored art and theater, and became a hub of intellectual life. Dramatists like Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes brought tragedy and comedy to life on stage, exploring fate, justice, and human weakness. No legacy of Greece is greater than its philosophy. Socrates wandered Athens, questioning everyone, challenging assumptions. He believed in reason, dialogue, and living an examined life. For this he was condemned, drinking hemlock in 399 BCE. His student Plato founded the Academy, envisioning a world of ideal forms beyond our senses. Plato's student, Aristotle, studied biology, ethics, logic, and politics. His work shaped Islamic, Christian, and European thought for centuries. They didn't just ask questions, they created frameworks for how we think. Greece may have lost battles, but it won minds. But the brilliance of Athens bred rivalry. Sparta, the militarized city of discipline and order, feared Athenian dominance. In 431 BCE, the Peloponnesian War erupted. It raged for nearly 30 years. Athens lost her fleet, her walls, and her confidence. Sparta triumphed, but all of Greece was weakened. Freedom and greatness had devoured themselves. In the 4th century BCE, a new power rose from the north. Macedon, led by Alexander the Great. Tutored by Aristotle, Alexander conquered the known world, from Greece to Egypt, Persia, and India. But he wasn't just a warrior, he spread Hellenism, blending Greek culture with Eastern lands. Cities like Alexandria became centers of science and learning. Though his empire crumbled after his death, the Greek spirit now flowed through half the world. What the Greeks began never truly ended. Democracy, drama, mathematics, architecture, philosophy, all were gifts to the world. From the Enlightenment to the founding of modern democracies, the ideas of Greece remained alive. The Olympic Games, the Socratic method, the pursuit of virtue, these are not just memories. They are living traditions. The Greeks built little in empire, but their empire was of the mind, and it still rules. In marble and thought, in freedom and debate, in the eternal flame of reason, the Greeks endure. Their cities may be ruins, but their legacy, timeless. They dream not of conquest, but of truth, and in that, they conquered eternity. Rome was born in blood and built on law. From republic to empire, it expanded across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Julius Caesar, Augustus, and Constantine shaped its destiny. The roads they built, the laws they passed, the architecture they raised, all echoed civilization. But decadence, division, and the weight of its own greatness brought decline. In 476 CE, the Western Empire fell. Yet the dream lived on in the Byzantine East. For a time. From the deserts of Arabia came a prophet and a new empire. The Rashidun, Umayyads, and Abbasids carried Islam from Spain to India. Baghdad became the jewel of the world, a center of science, poetry, and philosophy. But Mongols burned it, Crusaders challenged it, and rival empires fractured its unity. Still, its influence continues in language, faith, and thought across continents. In the 13th century, a storm rose from the steppes. Genghis Khan forged the largest contiguous empire in history. His horsemen moved like ghosts, from China to Europe. Though brutal, the Mongol Empire brought trade, tolerance, and communication across Eurasia. Yet it splintered after his death, as sons fought and borders hardened. With ships and steel, Europe launched a new age of empire. Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and others carved the world into colonies. Gold flowed, but so did blood. Indigenous peoples were displaced, cultures destroyed. The sun never set on the British Empire, but revolutions in America, India, and Africa foretold a new dawn. By the 20th century, empire was no longer a dream, but a shadow. The 20th century was shaped not by kings or conquerors, but by two colossal powers whose visions clashed on a global stage. On one side, the United States, championing capitalism, democracy, and individual freedom. On the other, the Soviet Union, advocating communism, state control, and revolutionary equality. Their rivalry defined borders, shaped economies, and threatened the very survival of civilization. This was not just a war of weapons. It was a war of worldviews. When World War II ended in 1945, the Allies stood victorious, but unity quickly fractured. Europe lay in ruins. The U.S. emerged as a superpower with unmatched industry and a new weapon, the atomic bomb. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had borne enormous sacrifice, 27 million lives lost, and claimed Eastern Europe as its sphere of influence. Winston Churchill famously declared an iron curtain had descended across Europe. West became capitalist, East turned communist. The Cold War had begun. The two systems clashed at their core. Capitalism emphasized private property, open markets, and democratic elections. Communism promised a classless society, with wealth shared through state ownership and central planning. Each saw itself as the future of mankind. Each feared the other's success. It was a battle not just for land, but for the soul of humanity. With trust gone, both sides built arsenals. The U.S. bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. By 1949, the Soviets had the bomb too. What followed was a terrifying arms race: hydrogen bombs, intercontinental missiles, submarines carrying nuclear payloads. Each side could destroy the world many times over. Meanwhile, they raced for the stars. The Soviets launched Sputnik in 1957 and Yuri Gagarin in 1961, the first human in space. The U.S. responded with the Apollo program, landing men on the moon in 1969. Victory in space was about science, but also about power. Though the superpowers never fought directly, they battled in other lands. In Korea, 1950-53, U.S. and UN forces fought to stop the spread of communism. In Vietnam, a costly and controversial war dragged on for years. In Cuba, the world held its breath in 1962 as Soviet missiles were discovered just 90 miles from Florida. A tense standoff brought us to the brink of nuclear war before both sides backed down. In Afghanistan, the Soviets waged a bloody war in the 1980s, only to face resistance funded by the U.S. Across the globe, the Cold War left scars. While the West enjoyed consumerism and cultural freedom, life in the East was tightly controlled. The KGB monitored citizens. Dissent was dangerous. Shortages, censorship, and one-party rule marked Soviet life. In the West, freedom thrived, but inequality and racial injustice remained. Both sides claimed moral high ground. Neither was perfect. By the 1980s, the Soviet system was strained. Wars, a stagnating economy, and calls for reform weakened its grip. Mikhail Gorbachev introduced glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. But the changes were too late or too fast. Eastern Europe rose up. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. One by one, Soviet satellite states broke free. In 1991, the USSR collapsed, ending the Cold War. The United States stood alone as the world's superpower, ushering in a new era of globalization, technology, and influence. But Cold War tensions never vanished. Russia re-emerged as a force. China rose as a rival. Old scars remained in Korea, Ukraine, Cuba, and beyond. The arms built during the Cold War still exist. So do the questions it raised. Can freedom coexist with security? Can global peace emerge from competition? And who decides what values shape the world? The Cold War was never just a standoff between nations. It was a test of belief about what kind of world we want and what we're willing to risk for it. Two titans cast long shadows, but in the end, it was not war, but change that brought resolution. And yet, even now, the world still lives in that shadow, still dreaming of peace, still haunted by power. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the ages. If history has taught us anything, it's that the future will be shaped by those who dare to dream. If you want to show some support and love, please give a like and subscribe for more.